I've recently finished up Final Fantasy VIII Remastered, which means it's time to share which characters were my favorite and which characters were not as well liked. I typically share my favorites from among the main playable characters in the game. Since there are only 6 main characters here, I'm going to include any character that you get to play over the course of the game. This makes for a total of 11 characters that will be on my list, but 2 of them will share a spot, making a nice even 10. As always on lists like this, there will likely be spoilers about Final Fantasy VIII. If you haven't played, then you probably don't want to move forward unless you just don't care about the spoilers. Also, these are just my opinions. Different characters hit different people in different ways. That's part of the fun about making lists like this, is having people who like different characters than you do. So feel free to share your favorites in the comments and why you like them so much. With all that out of the way, let's get to my list. At number 10, I have Cypher. You only actually get to control Cypher during the very beginning of the game. This is during the Seed exam when you go on the mission to Dalit. He is your squad's captain and part of your team until he goes off on his own. Cypher in many ways feels like a character that you aren't supposed to really like, which is good because I didn't really enjoy him as a character. In many ways, he is presented as a mirror to Squall in everything from his clothing, looks, personality, and interactions with those around him. Even so, the game doesn't really make Cypher a very likable character. He is rude, arrogant, and pretty much a bully. His motivations in the game are also not super clear. During the party's mission to Timber to help Renoa's group of freedom fighters, Cypher shows up to attack the president of Galbadia. He does this to help Renoa since he was her contact with the garden in the first place. At some point during the chaos caused by this, Cypher winds up joining Sorceress Edea. It's not clear why exactly, but the next time you see him, he is acting as the sorceress's knight. Between this lack of understanding Cypher's motivations and the fact that his personality is pretty awful, I just didn't like Cypher. Considering that you fight him as a boss more than any other character, you could say that he's the most consistent antagonist of the whole game. Even so, he never really feels like a significant threat in that role either. More like a misguided child who's been led down the wrong path. Problem is that he's so unlikable that it's hard to feel all that sympathetic for him. Number 9, I have Edea. Edea is a tough character to know what to think about. This is because the Edea you are introduced to early on is very different from the Edea that you see in the second half of the game. During the first half, Edea seems like she is the main antagonist of the game. She rises to power in the nation of Galbadia, takes control of it after killing the current ruler, and seeks to grasp even more power with her knight Cypher by her side. You later learn though that Edea is actually possessed by another sorceress named Ultimacia, a sorceress from the future. The real Edea is pretty much the exact opposite of Ultimacia. While Ultimacia is ruthless and power-hungry, Edea is kind, quiet, and selfless. You also learn that Edea is the wife of Headmaster Cid. The two of them ran an orphanage for kids orphaned by the Sorceress War. This included the majority of your party, the only exception being Renoa. It is after coming back to her senses that she joins your party so that you can take her to Esthar in order to steal her sorceress powers. At this point, though, she's no longer a sorceress, because she had passed her powers to Renoa after the party defeated her while she was possessed. Did you get all that? It's a bit confusing, and to be honest, that's probably why Edea is this low. She made a good villain, but she was also really nice and a good support to the cast, both in the past and in the present. The problem was having her be 2 very different things in the narrative. That made it hard for her to really shine. The fact that most of the party forgot about her for some contrived reason and the whole possession plotline just made her a character that wasn't bad, but felt more like a red herring in the plot than a fully developed character. At number 8, I have Kyros and Ward. I'm grouping these 2 together because neither has a super strong role in the narrative, and they both tend to fill the same role overall. Kyros and Ward are the close friends of Laguna, and as the story progresses, our party falls into these dreams, which is actually the past, and you control these 3 at various times in their lives. Kyros and Ward are both the kind, supportive straight men to Laguna's wacky hijinks and poorly thought out plans. They start the game out as Galbadian soldiers, but leave once a mission goes south and they are believed dead. They're all wounded severely from this mission, but Ward seems to be the only one with any long-term effects. His wounds made it so that he could not speak anymore. He then later on works at the D District Prison, which is helpful for the party when Zell is able to use information gained by being Ward in a dream to help them escape that same prison. Kyros, on the other hand, seems in contact more with Ward and Laguna and wanders around the world a little bit more. After a certain amount of time, the 3 reunite and head to Esthar to rescue Laguna's adopted daughter Alone, which leads them all to be significant figures in Esthar in the present. I liked Kyros and Ward well enough, but they just weren't really given enough development to place them higher on the list. They're great friends to Laguna and are good men, and I like them a lot, but it's hard to really say that I knew a lot about them or that they were really developed all that much. At number 7, I have Zell. While I don't dislike Zell overall, his impulsiveness and tendency to overreact led him to be my least favorite of the main cast. Zell just has a lot of energy and doesn't always channel that energy in the best of ways. The biggest example of this is when he lets it known that the party is from the garden when Cypher takes the Galbadian president hostage at the Timber TV station. This makes Zell feel horrible, and nothing comes out of it directly anyway, but it shows how Zell's energy doesn't always lead to thoughtful action. Zell's not all bad by any means. He's an instrumental part of the party's escape from the D District prison. This is because he can fight unarmed and knows the layout of the prison due to inhabiting Ward, who worked there in one of the dreams of the past. While Zell grows to become more of a leader as well, taking inspiration from Squall, he still doesn't really grow out of his impulsive nature. Zell doesn't listen to Dr. Odine before heading off to board the lunatic Pandora. Also, in the final cutscene of the game, he is almost choking on his beloved hot dogs because he is trying to eat them way too fast. It just shows that he's still the impulsive person that he always was. Well, this isn't awful, it just didn't make him my favorite character either. At number 6, I have Irvine. It's a tough call for me between Zell and Irvine for the least favorite of the main party. Irvine is a self-styled ladies' man and seems to exude self-confidence. Over the course of the game though, it feels like these exterior presentations are somewhat at odds with who Irvine really is as a person. While Irvine is this ladies' man type character and tries to gain favor with pretty much any female character that he comes across, it's pretty clear through the course of the story that his affections are pretty centered on Selphie. He is a constant support to her throughout the story and is instrumental in making one of Selphie's dreams come true in organizing an alternate garden festival at Fisherman's Horizon. This is both due to Selphie's sorrow over the destruction of Trabia Garden, where she recently transferred from, and also the destruction of all the preparations for the garden festival at Balam with all the recent fighting. He also does this in part to try to get Squall and Renoa a little closer as well, showing that it's not all about him. Irvine's lone wolf-style self-confidence also appears to be a bit of an act. When he's set to assassinate the sorceress, Irvine chokes. At first you just think that all of Irvine's confidence was just bravado. However, as the narrative progresses, another possibility emerges. Irvine is the one who remembers everyone from the past since he hasn't had as much exposure to GFs. It is very possible that his hesitation is due to recognizing who Adea really is and not wanting to kill the woman who was instrumental in raising him. Irvine, despite being the last one to join your party, winds up being a pretty big influence on the unity of the party. He helps rescue the party from the D District prison, mainly due to Renoa forcing him, but he does stay back to provide cover for the party to escape. He's also the one who reveals the shared past of most of the party as orphans when the party is at Trabia Garden, causing everyone to remember that they grew up together at an orphanage. Even though it's not my favorite plot device, having Irvine help everyone regain their memories is a pretty important moment in the game. Irvine also just seems to really enjoy being part of your group. While I do wish that he lost a bit of his womanizing tendencies, I still found Irvine to be a fairly enjoyable character overall. Number 5, I have Selphie. Selphie is another upbeat and energetic character in your party. She comes across as very cheerful and optimistic, but like many characters in Final Fantasy VIII, this surface personality isn't all there is to Selphie. When the Galbadians send missiles to Trabia Garden, Selphie is the one who leads the assault to avenge Trabia and save Balam from the same fate. While this mission mostly fails and they almost die in the process, it is Selphie who saves them by having the group take refuge in the remains of a war machine they just defeated. Her cheerfulness and optimism are also things that she seems to cling to even when things are grim and she is struggling with negative emotions. Despite being emotionally distraught over the destruction of Trabia Garden, when the party visits the location, she is a pillar of strength and support for her friends there. Even when visiting the graves of some of her friends, she talks about how she was able to fulfill their dream of playing in a band. While there may be unhealthy aspects to this, I think that Selphie's ability to cling to the good even while going through disasters is a sign of how strong Selphie really is. It's that strength to be able to move forward and still be cheerful that makes me like Selphie so much. I wish I had that tendency, but I often don't. Her optimism isn't just some empty hope that things will be better, but rather that if she and the party work hard enough together that they can create those good outcomes. And that's why I enjoy Selphie quite a bit. At number 4, I have Laguna. Laguna was kind of a hard person to figure out where I wanted to stick him on this list. He falls a bit into the irresponsible and impulsive category and tends to act first and make plans later, if at all. However, it's not that Laguna is immature exactly, it's more that he has the optimism that everything will work out in the end. This optimism isn't always very well founded. Overall though, Laguna and his friends make it through a lot of close calls and wind up being the ones in charge of the nation of Estar when our party meets them in the present. So obviously that optimism didn't hurt him too bad in the long run. While Laguna is awkward, impulsive, and a bit reckless, he's also loyal, kind, and seems to have a good deal of tenacity and luck to get him out of tough spots and into places of importance. There is one area in life that he doesn't seem to have the best of luck in, and that is with the woman he loves. Early on, he falls for Julia, a piano player at the Galbadia Hotel, and she was also interested in him too. They only start to talk together before the fated mission that almost cost Laguna and his friends their lives. Laguna was believed to be dead, and so she moved on and married another man and wound up being Renoa's mother. She winds up dying herself in a car accident when Renoa was young. After this mission, Laguna was in rough shape and is found by Rain from the town of Windhill and nursed back to health. Laguna is grateful for this and repays Rain back by looking after Alone and trolling the town to keep it monster free. Eventually, Rain and Laguna fall in love and are married. This happiness is short-lived though, as Alone is kidnapped by Estar and Laguna sets off to rescue her. While this mission is successful, Rain dies while Laguna is away shortly after giving birth to Squall. With Laguna's interesting personality and the ability to see him at different parts of his life, he winds up being a character that I enjoyed. He's a bit overly silly and impulsive, but he's still a guy who's been through quite a bit and still holds to his principles and continues to care about those around him. So I did really kind of like him in the narrative. At the same time, he could have been even better, I think, if some of his goofier, weird antics were maybe toned down a little bit and we were given a little bit more fleshing out of some of the aspects of his life. At number 3, I have Quistis. I've always liked Quistis as a character from as far back as I can remember. Admittedly, the fact that she was crushing hard on Squall when she was the instructor is a bit off, but she was only a year older than Squall at this time, so it's kinda hard to fault her for this and consider it that weird of a situation. I feel like Quistis is someone who has taken a lot of responsibility upon herself, but has very few people that she can really share her burdens with. While her crush on Squall was maybe a bit too obvious and desperate feeling, I liked most everything else about Quistis. She's obviously very smart, but she also has plenty of sass as well. One of my favorite times is when Cypher gets mad at Quistis for wishing him luck before the seed exam. He says that only bad students need luck, to which Quistis wishes him good luck once again. She's not afraid of Cypher and is able to show that with a clever retort. I think what really makes me like Quistis is that she seems the most down-to-earth of the cast. She's not over-the-top energetic or aloof. She is smart, capable, funny, and doesn't back down. Even with these positive attributes, she still seems to struggle with connection and confidence at times. She just feels like one of the more real characters from the game. Unfortunately, Quistis doesn't really have her own time to shine that much. Her unique elements are her starting off as an instructor and her crush on Squall, a crush that she later realizes is more of an older sister protectiveness. She realizes this once everyone remembers that they grew up together at Idea's orphanage. Beyond this, she doesn't have a moment that feels uniquely hers. Instead, she feels more like a constant presence throughout the story, either as instructor or mentor, and then as fellow high-level leader within Seed. Quistis has always just been an enjoyable character for me. To be honest, while I do love Renoa as a character, if Squall were to have a different love interest in the game, I would not be against Quistis filling that role. At number 2, I have Squall. Now, I was torn between where to stick the top 2 on my list. I knew that Squall and Renoa would be there. I just had to figure out which one was going where. After thinking it through, I decided to place Squall in the second position. This may seem a bit strange to some people since Squall is the main character of the game. He's who you're playing as 90% of the time. I think he also probably has the strongest character arc of the game as well, going from a rather isolated loner who doesn't want to rely on anyone but himself to someone who finds friends and learns how to rely on and care for others. So why didn't he earn the top spot? 2 reasons come to mind right away. First is that Squall doesn't really start off all that likable. He's dismissive and doesn't really care much about what other people think. He's not quite the level of jerk that Cypher is, but he just wants to be left alone and not get caught up in other people's issues. While I'm sure we can all understand these feelings to some degree, Squall seems to take these to an extreme degree. The second reason is that I don't feel like Squall on his own is the cause for change. It's not like he realized he was being stupid and decided to work on being more open and caring. It kind of felt like Squall was pushed in the right direction by those around him. While that is by no means a guarantee of change, and Squall does deserve credit for some of the change he undergoes over the course of the story, it also felt like Squall could have easily stayed as a loner style character had circumstances been different. While these things did hold him back a little in my mind, I did enjoy seeing Squall grow and develop as a character. I also felt it was a realistic change. Squall didn't suddenly become super outgoing or anything, he just learned to tell people what he thought a little bit more and was willing to open up to those around him. It wasn't some drastic change of personality, but was enough to show some good growth from someone who used to try to go it all on his own. And I think you just see this in all the aspects of his life. You see it as he takes a more active leadership role in Seed and the Garden. This is particularly seen in the part where he's giving the motivational speech while the Galbadian garden is attacking Balam garden, where he opens up to the whole garden and encourages them and gets them to fight with the last little bits of energy that they still have left. It's just a kind of an emotional moment, and one that shows him kind of stepping into that role of leadership fully. You see it also with his relationship with Rinoa, as he's able to open up more to her and admit that he does care about her and can take extreme actions to try to get her back whenever there's things that happen to her. Yeah, I just really did enjoy the growth that Squall shows over the course of the narrative, but I also have to admit that I don't think that Squall did this on his own, and that without some of the supporting cast, and particularly our number one, that he could have easily stayed pretty static if he was able to. So that leads us to the number one slot, and that is Rinoa. I can't help but feel that Rinoa is a main driving force in the story, despite Rinoa being the only non-seed main party member. She hires a group of seeds to help her group of freedom fighters, the Timber Owls, in their quest to free Timber from the control of Galbadia. This group winds up being Squall, Zell, and Selphie, and sends our party from one event to another in an ever-escalating threat, not just to Timber, but to all of time and space. She's not only instrumental to the main narrative, but is the driving force in causing Squall to open up and rely on others more. She's willing to call Squall out when he's living in his head and trying to do things on his own. For some reason, she seems to cause Squall to change, despite not being the first person to try to draw Squall out of his hardened exterior. While Rinoa may start out the game a bit naive and overly optimistic on how hard it would be to free Timber, she's someone who acts on her commitment and refuses to give up. Even if nobody believes in her, she will take matters into her own hands and try to do it herself. The most notable being the time she tried to put the Odine bangle on Idea after Quistis derided her idea as just being due to Rinoa's disagreement with her father. It is also very likely that without her, the party would never have escaped the D-District prison. It was her idea to come back and rescue the party, and she had to rather forcibly convince Irvine to go along with this plan, which shows that she doesn't just care about herself, but also about her friends and allies. She doesn't want to leave anyone behind. Rinoa is by no means perfect. She does fall into a bit of a damsel in distress role a few places in the game. The most egregious in my mind was the one during the battle between Balam and Galbadia Gardens. That one just felt a bit silly. Her comatose state after the defeat of Idea was a bit more understandable and felt like a turning point in Squall's transformation. It was here that he seemed to realize how much he actually cared for Rinoa and was willing to do whatever it took to get her back. Rinoa returned those feelings as well when they were alone on the Ragnarok. It is this connection between Rinoa and Squall that allows her to find him after the final battle against Ultimacia, as Squall is lost in time and space, or whatever it is that's going on at the end of this game. While in many ways it was super hard to decide who to stick at the top, I felt that Rinoa was just a little bit more of a force in the narrative than Squall was. It was her initiative that led the party down the path that led them to face the antagonists of the game, and her initiative that led Squall to open up more to both friendship and romance. And that's my list of favorite characters from Final Fantasy VIII. Who was your favorite character of the game? Who didn't you like? How did your list differ from mine? Feel free to answer any of these questions in the comments below. It's always fun to see how people view things differently and the reasons behind their choices. That's all for this video though, so I'll see you in the next one.